Welcome back to the Changemaker podcast. I'm your host, Deke Copenhaver. Today, my guest is Eduardo Gomez Rojas is an internationally exhibited figurative sculptor whose recent marble sculpture, Mountain of Grief, won first place at the Vero Beach Museum of Art in a juried exhibition of more than 800 entries. The piece stopped viewers in their tracks, many moved to tears, not because it was designed to shock, but because it was honest. Mountain of Grief is a Portuguese marble sculpture by Eduardo that he carried inside him for 48 years. It's a portrait of his wife curled inward in mourning after the loss of their 3-year-old daughter to cancer. Eduardo has said the figure represents how the body carries the footprints of the soul, a philosophy that defines his life's work as both an artist and teacher. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Eduardo.
Welcome to the Changemaker podcast, hosted by Deke Copenhaver. Deke is the author of The Changemaker, a Forbes publishing book that has reached #1 on Amazon on multiple occasions and in multiple categories like management skills and total quality management. During this podcast, Deke interviews exceptional change-making leaders. Deke currently operates Copenhaver Consulting, where he helps local governments and other public organizations maximize their potential. He's also a sought-after public speaker. We hope that the Changemaker has an impact on you today and that you find takeaways that make you a better leader in your life. Now, here's Deke.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. Well, we have literally run a gauntlet to get to the point where we can do this interview. But just for our listeners and our viewers, tell them just a little bit about your background, where you were born, what led you to this point, and what led you into becoming a sculptor.
My career as a sculptor started when I was 7 years old, because I was born in Colombia, South America. My grandfather retired and went to live in Madrid, Spain. And my dad decided when I was 7 years old that I needed to go visit my grandfather. And that was a crazy thing because it was a flight that took 23 hours and it had 5 stops.
Were you by yourself?
Yeah, by myself. So I got to Spain, and my aunt who lived with my grandfather was taking care of me. And one day it was winter. One day we went for a walk, and there was a small studio on a side street where she had a girlfriend. The woman was a potter, and she was making a small sculpture of the Blessed Mother. And as a 7-year-old watching this, I said, "What is that?" Meaning, what is the material?
Yeah.
And she said, "It's mud." She didn't explain what difference between clay and mud, but it was mud. And so I was amazed that something so beautiful could be made with mud. And so at that moment, when I was 7, I felt that I one day wanted to do that. And it took me all my life to do that, and many circuitous paths. When I was 18, I met a girl. I was in my first year of college. Going to college in engineering school, which is the furthest thing from Hawaii. And I was doing that because my father owned a manufacturing company, and he wanted all of us to be engineers. There were 6 of us, and if he could have made 6 engineers, he would have been here. So I met this girl in a bus, and it so happened that this girl was an American girl from Milwaukee, and we fell in love, and I followed her, went back and graduated from the University of Wisconsin, and then I did other things. I have 3 different degrees, if that matters, and and that's a long story, and
Well, I'll tell you, and I love that because I describe my own career, if you can call it that, as being circuitous too. So I majored in business, but the same reason you were majoring in engineering, because I felt like my father wanted me to. I got my degree in political science. I was in banking, real estate, and development, ran a nonprofit for 4 years, was mayor for 9 years, wrote a best-selling book. I'm like, I'm still trying to figure out what I want to do when I grow up. But I tell people, and I want to get your take on this, that there's an old saying that a mind is like a parachute. It works best when it's open. And I think if you go through life with an open mind and not just so rigid and this is what I'm going to do, it makes for a richer life to me.
well, that is correct. If circuitous is equivalent to rich, I'm a billionaire.
No, well, I tell you, so I'm 58 years old. I'm a cancer survivor. So the city where I live, Augusta, Georgia, took a direct hit from Hurricane Helene. So now I'm executive director of our long-term recovery group. And I tell people, I'm like, I didn't think I'd be starting a new career as a 58-year-old cancer survivor. And my spiritual advisor said, yes, but that's not your choice to make. That's God's choice. And I said, okay, you're right. I'll listen to what he has to say.
Well, when I was 18 and at the university, I took a few art classes, and one of them was sculpture. For some reason, I signed up, and they gave me a piece of alabaster that was wedge shaped, and I carved my first sculpture out of a piece of alabaster at the time, and with inadequate tools and anything, but that was the first sculpture that I ever made. And then life took a lot of turns because we needed to make a living, and most artists never make a living doing art completely unless they're old or successful or both.
Yeah.
And so I started doing that, and one day we were at the Metropolitan Museum with my wife watching the sculpture exhibit of Auguste Rodin, and we were in front of the sculpture called the Burghers of Calais, which is a huge sculpture with 5 figures. And we were standing there and we were looking at it. And I said to my wife, I think I can do that. And surprisingly enough, she said, why don't you try? And so I went, at that time we lived in Little Rock, Arkansas. So we went back home because we were on vacation. And I went to the university and I signed up as a postgraduate student in sculpture and got my degree and all that. And then that started my whole new life and a career for me.
It's interesting, particularly in the times we live in, that there you see, and I don't think we're as divided as a nation or as a people in general as we're led to believe by, the mainstream media and politicians as well. But I think I view art as a connective tissue between all of us. So I read a great book by a gentleman named Makoto Fujimura called Culture Care. But talking about just from a faith perspective, we need to nurture it. We need to grow it. We need it. It's that connective tissue between all of us. But one thing, so having come through cancer, I'm like, I look for things that unite us, not divide us. But you've really, the sculpture that we're discussing that I just mentioned, that came from grief. And I'm like, we as humans share in grief. Everybody I know has either had cancer, had a loved one that had it, or a friend. So, but talk a little bit about how grief led you to this point.
Well, I think we were very young. We were maybe 22 or 23 years old when our daughter died of cancer, and of course, it was a very tragic and terrible situation for both of us. And however, I think there's some redemptive value in pain, in that I think pain forces people to become more real and forces people to understand better who they really are, and forces people to maybe reconsider their priorities, like what you were saying. And so, we only have one life.
Exactly.
And we have to live the life in the way that God made us to be. We are who we are, and we just and life is kind of a discovery of who we are, and pain is part of that discovery, and so is happiness.
It is, and every day. So my faith has been strengthened through having gone through cancer, but I thank God for joy and sorrow, for pleasure and pain, because it's all interconnected. So I lost my mother to cancer when I was 25 years old, literally a week after my 25th birthday. I lost my first wife. She took her own life when I was 29 years old. But I've seen how that shaped me as a person. And I tell people, because we have a rash of, loneliness and sadness in the younger generation. And locally, we've had so many suicides. But I'm trying to minister to our younger generation and say, okay, I've now been married for 26 years. I went through that in my 20s, but you do, and I'd love to get your take on this. You have to allow yourself to go through the grieving process to heal.
Yes, and we had it was probably the one thing that saved our marriage is allowing that, because the problem when you're married and you go through grieving, you have a situation where each of the people is so in such degree of pain that they are not able to be there for the other person. So it so happens that many marriages do not last very long after that happens. In our case, we were lucky, and we've been married 55 years.
Well, and that's, I think, in today's world, and maybe young people, and maybe social media has something to do with it, immediate gratification. But I'm like, marriage, as I say, I've been married 26, almost 27 years now. It takes work, and it's not all glamorous, and it's not like everything you see. I'm off of social media, but everybody looks like they've got the best life, and I'm like, look, life is hard. And we need to realize that. But God meant for us to live in community and to minister to each other, because we're bound not by our strengths, but by our weaknesses and our vulnerability.
Yes, and I think when we have pain, we become able to understand the vulnerability of other people. So anyway, but going back to the sculpture, so for 48 years, I made a few pieces of art that relate to that experience. And one was a painting that I made that depicts a man walking a lonely street, and that's because when this happened, I lost my ability to see color, and so I remember walking to work, and the street. The one thing I remember were the cracks in the pavement, and and it was winter, and we lived up in Wisconsin, which is really cold, and I made a painting of that about 20 years later. And then 20 years after that, I decided to make this sculpture because I had bought this piece of marble from the widow of another sculptor who had died. And I went to her studio to buy some tools because I felt sorry for her. And I had this piece of marble, and I decided to start carving it. And the one thing that kept coming to my head was my wife in deep sorrow in a fetal position, which is the sculpture that you're talking about.
Well, it's interesting that we should be talking today about grief and sorrow. So on Monday, I lost a good friend of mine to terminal lung cancer, but he was diagnosed in August of 2024 with esophageal cancer, which is what I came through. So he reached out to me to begin with, and so he made it through the esophageal cancer, but his wife was mentally ill, and the focus on getting him through that. Once he got through, she took her own life, and then he was diagnosed with terminal lung cancer. But he reached out to me knowing that I'd gone through a similar experience. So after that point, I would visit him once a week, and his attitude was absolutely amazing. I mean, for somebody to go through all that, but it was kind of like the long goodbye. I mean, that lasted for probably 8 months or so. But I told him during that, I said, you've made me a better friend through this process, because I realized what it's here again. It's like marriage. It's not all glamorous, and friendships aren't all having good times at the bar, drinking with your buddies. I mean, it's the tough stuff too. But I'm indebted to him. I'm a pallbearer and a speaker at his funeral tomorrow. But it's not like I view it. I'm sad that he's gone. I'm glad that he's at peace. But really, I will value that experience for the rest of my life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and I think that's, once again, any experience that you go through in your life, it can make you a stronger person. It can wash some people away. But as I say, I've been through plenty of goods and bads and ups and downs, as you have been, as is life. But you just got to keep going. And I think truly too that if you make it through situations like you and your wife did at a very young age, it is other people take strength from seeing that you're able to make it through those situations.
Yeah, and I think that interestingly enough, I think that thinking back, I think my daughter's life, though short, touched the lives of many people, starting with ours, of course. but also there were other people who were friends and family and people who were touched by that whole experience. And looking in the positive side, I think the lesson is that things get better, and there's reasons to feel happy and to look forward to other things. In our case, we had another child who needed us and who needed a father and a mother, and we had to keep going. And then we had another child, a daughter, and today we have 9 grandkids and 2 great grandkids, and we have people in our family. There's like 20 people in our family.
And it's funny. I'm the youngest of 5 children. My oldest brother, who passed from cancer, was 21 years older than me. So I'd always been the youngest. I always wanted younger brothers and sisters. Well, ended up having 10 nieces and nephews, but becoming an uncle when I was 9, I've now got 13. My wife and I have 13 great nieces and nephews with another one on the way. And I'm like, so I don't think God meant for me to be a parent. He meant for my wife and I to be an aunt and an uncle. And I'm like, it's great because I've got all the kids in my life that I could ever want, and I don't have to educate any of them.
Yeah, that's rough. It's college these days is expensive.
Oh, I can't even imagine. But that's so when I was in office, I said I had such a strong emotional connection to the people I served, and I said it would make it easier if I didn't have that connection. Same thing in helping out with our hurricane recovery. I mean, there are still people in Augusta, Georgia, more than a year in with trees on their houses. And I'm like, I can't, but if I didn't feel so deeply, I probably wouldn't do the things that I do. And I'm like, I would rather, if you love a lot of people, you've got a big family, you're going to go through loss. But I'm like, I would rather than isolate myself, as some people do, I'm like, I would rather love and go through the loss than not have all these people that I love in my life.
Absolutely.
So what is are you touring with your sculpture, or what's your average day look? Are you working on new works?
Yeah, well, right here, let's see if I can. This is a new project I'm working on right now. This is a project actually that is going to probably go in a place that is a halfway house for ex-convicts up in Wisconsin, and it's a sculpture that depicts the fact that redemption is something that happens when we get together, and so you have this is a maquette.
Yeah,
it's a rendering of it's a clay sketch of this is going to probably be a 6 foot to 6 foot figure.
Wow.
Full size. But this is how the idea emerges for a new sculpture. So that's one project I'm working on. I work every day. I come to, this is my office right here. So I come every day, and my wife says when I go back to the house at 4:00, she says, "Did you move the rock today?"
Well,
and I said, about a millimeter.
Well, I'll tell you, and I having been a politician, people say that you're politically agnostic, but I do think in today's world, every morning I pray, Lord, continue to remove the scales from my eyes and the eyes of your people, and help us to see each other not as the other or the enemy, but as your image bearers. And it just things these days when people are being portrayed politically to be the other, and if you're not on my side, I'm going to demonize you. I'm like, that's so. And part of what we're doing in the recovery process is a gaps analysis to see who was unserved, who was underserved in the wake of the hurricane. So we had a meeting, and the lady said, look, I deal with addicts. So in the weeks after the hurricane, we had so many relapses and overdoses because people couldn't get access to treatment. And I said, well, look, we need to view everybody in this. These are our neighbors. People with addiction issues are our neighbors. You know, people that are homeless are our neighbors. That's what I continually focus on. But I love the redemptive process. It's like, you know, God can redeem anybody. Nobody is beyond redemption.
No, but it's an effort that requires community also. It's an effort that requires community. So it requires another hand, and we are redeemed through the cooperation of each other. And we, just like you have a ministry that helps other people, we all have a ministry of sorts.
Absolutely.
And mine is art, but you know, you can have a ministry as a politician, or you could have a ministry as a responsible businessman. You know.
No, I agree, and it's funny. People have said, you know, you need to become a minister, and I said, no. I'm like, that way I could only play for one team. I want to be able to play with every team, but it is, you know, life is meant to be lived in community and together, and we are all sinners redeemed by grace, as far as I'm concerned. I try not to judge, but what you're doing, you know, it's inspiring to me in the way that you took grief and turned it into something, to a work of art that touches people's lives. Your story is inspirational to me.
Thank you. Your story is inspirational to me.
Well, I appreciate it. It's funny though, Eduardo, I'll tell you. So as I say, getting into another field. So the way that we're doing disaster recovery here, we've established a supply chain. We've got the Community Foundation is our fiscal agent. So our organization handles no monies. All money goes directly to purchasing supplies to help aid people. And it's simple business practices and my faith, but apparently that's not the norm with disaster recovery. So I've been invited to speak in Miami next week, and then in New Orleans. I'm like, I never saw this coming at 58 years old. But part of what I've told people is to share my testimony, because had the Lord not brought me through cancer, I wouldn't be able to do the work. So I thank the Lord every day for that. But I love that you referenced that your art is your ministry.
Yeah, and look, art is nothing more than a visual representation of who we are. And it affects people in different ways. Now, when you have a piece of art like this, you, the viewer, you come to the piece of art, and you bring your baggage with you.
Mm-hmm.
Your life, all the baggage that you have accumulated in your life, and that affects the way you see the world and how you understand life, etc. And you see that. So the viewer completes the artwork, because what I was thinking when I did that, frankly, in the end, it's irrelevant.
I love that you would say that. And I'll tell you, there was a movie, Imagine, about John Lennon. It was a documentary, but he had somebody in England that was apparently on drugs, came onto his property, and John Lennon and Yoko Ono brought him in and fed him breakfast. And he said, "Man, you wrote all these songs just for me." And he said, "No, I wrote them for myself. But if you can read something into it, that's great." And that's what, I love. I do a lot of public speaking. I've never written a speech because I'm like, if you're just open and honest, you have a visceral connection with your listener. And that's what I think art has, a visceral connection. It makes you feel. And that's something that we desperately need.
I'll tell you a story. I was in Denver, Colorado, in Loveland, Colorado, actually, years ago, in a national sculpture show that is pretty well known. And I had a booth, and I had one of my sculptures that I made were two dancing figures, a man and a woman, but I used them kind of to study anatomy. And anyway, I had only one of the figures finished because the foundry had not cast the other figure. And so I brought this figure to the show, and it was a woman, a ballet dancer in a very extreme position. And this woman came walking by with a carriage and a baby. And she stopped over there and she looked at the sculpture and she started crying. And I'm like, I felt terrible. I'm like, so I walked up to her and I said, "Are you okay?" I said, "What's wrong?" And she says, "Well, this is just the story of my life. Obviously, I didn't make a sculpture about the story of her life.
No.
Nor was I trying to do any of it, make her cry either. Whatever it is that touched her about that piece of art was just a reflection of who I am and how that comes across in a material. But it was not. I was not trying to be deep or sensitive or any of that.
Well, but unknowingly, you elicited her humanity, and I think that is a beautiful thing. And here again,
that's what art does.
That's what art does. It's got a redemptive and healing quality to it. So thank you for the work that you're doing to heal through your art. And as we get down to the end now, I want to have you back because I'm like, we waited so long to talk, and now I could talk to you for literally hours. But where can people find you?
People can find me here in my studio.
I mean, do you have online presence or anything?
Oh, yeah. I have two websites, eduardogomez.com and eduardogomezgallery.com. So if you go to either of those two websites, you can see my work. And one is just like a show place, and the other one is actually a place where if you like something, you can buy it. So it's like an online gallery.
Well, cool. So my final question is, on a daily basis, what puts a smile on your face and brings joy to your heart?
My grandkids. I mean, in the long term, that's our legacy.
Exactly.
Our legacy are the people we touch. I happen to have a whole bunch of those people. And as I get older, and I think that maybe one day I may not be around, I think, I want to make sure that when I leave this world, that somebody doesn't say, "Boy, am I glad that SOB is dead."
Yeah, me too. I hope they don't say that about me. But Eduardo, I will tell you, thank you for being an amazing guest, and this conversation has been an absolute pleasure.
Well, thank you. The same here, and thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely. Well, that's all the time we got. Dropping the mic, and we are out. Hey, guys, thanks for listening to or watching the Changemaker podcast today. Greatly appreciate it. If you're listening and you want to see the video, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel at Deke Copenhaver. That's a pretty easy to remember, I would think. But really, we also want to remind you to like, subscribe, rate across all platforms, download. And if you're looking for a coach, a speaker, or anything, you know where to find me. Just email me at me@dekecopenhaver.com. And thanks so much for listening.